job application process sucks. It's hard. You get ghosted all the time. You get rejected. It's not fun at all. In this episode, we're peeling back the curtain and giving you guys an exclusive sneak peek into what it's like to be a hiring data manager. My guest today is Megan McGuire. She is a senior data manager who just went through the hiring process not too long ago. She's going to open up the door and let us see through her whole process. How many applications did she get? How long was the job listing up for? What's made candidates stand out over other candidates? Who did they end up hiring and why? It's all covered in today's episode, so I'm really excited. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Data Career Podcast, the podcast that helps aspiring data professionals land their next data job. Here's your host, Avery Smith.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Data Career Podcast. I'm joined today by Megan McGuire, who is a senior data analytics manager at General Assembly and is gracious enough to kind of walk through a day in a life as a data analytics manager, specifically through the hiring process. So when you actually go in and submit an application, what happens from there? Megan's here to tell us all about it. So thanks for joining us today, Megan.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Okay, awesome. So you are the scary, imagined hiring manager, but you don't look so scary. You look pretty nice. So it's fun to actually see the human behind kind of this mythical idea here. And you recently just hired someone, right? You hired your fifth person onto your team?
Yes, I hired a junior analyst onto my team late last year.
Okay. And that brought up your team to around 5 people. And you guys basically do all sorts of different analytics projects in sales, marketing, customer learning, those types of things.
Yeah, all over the business, some marketing, some sales, some delivery, financial reporting, regulatory reporting. It really runs the gamut. Anything we need to make smarter decisions as a business, my team helps support.
I love that because that's data analytics at the end of the day is how can we make better business decisions that are more factual based off of data? How did you guys know that you needed to even hire someone new? Like what kind of brought that up?
Yeah, so we actually came at it and we knew pretty quickly we wanted somebody at the junior level. Part of what we were struggling with is I have a team that's mostly senior analysts, lots of experience, 8 to 10 plus years of experience, lots of knowledge, lots of specialized knowledge. And we had a lot of in-depth reporting requests and data questions we wanted to address, like rebuilding our forecasting process. But we wanted to bring somebody in at the junior level to obviously learn from that, but also be able to support some of the lighter stuff. So being able to support some of our more operational analytics. So things like how many students did we have in Texas last year to be able to support a regulatory request. It's the sort of thing that at the senior level, like they breeze through it really quickly, but we still have other ways that we need to use their time. So we were able to see that we had this sort of gap in coverage that would be really well addressed by somebody at the junior level. And our business is a lot about upskilling, helping people find new careers. So it's really exciting when we see an opportunity to help somebody learn and move into this new space.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I feel like sometimes people are afraid that there is never going to be any entry level positions, but you guys obviously created this entry level position. And it sounds like it was mostly to kind of offload some of the work that some of the senior analysts were already doing. So I think good to know that there's entry level jobs that are available. And then also I imagine that the senior analysts would be available to kind of help this new person get their feet into the projects and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. They've been a fantastic group all around. So the senior analysts have already been very collaborative with each other. For all of those years of experience, you're still going to learn different things about data analytics, different areas of business, different techniques. So they were already very collaborative with each other, sharing all of that knowledge. And then by folding a junior analyst into the role, they had so many other things that they could teach. And then they were all learning from each other as well. So we have one analyst who's an expert in marketing. And with her helping upskill our junior analyst in that area so that she could learn more about marketing reporting, everybody else kind of joined in on that too. So it just created a larger circle of collaboration. And then, having a junior analyst there, she obviously asked more questions, which is great to have on the team because a lot of the times we didn't have answers. So those questions and that presence was really helpful for us. It helped us refine, why don't we know the answer to that? Is that something we need to get on our roadmap so that we can clarify it? Do we need to add documentation? So she had a lot of support from the other analysts in the group, a lot of new things to learn, but also brought a lot to that crew as well.
Okay, awesome. So you guys kind of decide, you as a manager and your senior analyst decide, okay, we want to get a junior analyst into this team so that we can offload some of the stuff that we're doing so we can maybe focus on a little bit harder things or something like that. So you go and talk to HR. And do you create the job description or do you create that as a team or does HR create that?
That comes from me. I've actually created our entire BI career ladder as the hiring manager. So I have, even for levels that we've never filled or that we haven't filled in the last couple of years, I have a career ladder spelling out our overall competency rubric. So these are the general skills you should have in any BI analyst role. And then with some additional detail on responsibilities, the leveling I expect in each of them. So like, I expect really high proficiency in SQL from a senior analyst. I expect some knowledge of SQL in a junior analyst.
Okay, very cool. That's good to know that someone who knows about data wrote this one. I know it'll differ from company to company, but sometimes I
Mhm.
look at some of these job requirements and I haven't written too many myself, so I can't like say how easy or how hard it is. But sometimes they're like, I think I don't know if this was even true. I saw this like meme of someone asking for like 5+ years of
Oh, yeah.
ChatGPT experience. And it was like, okay, that hasn't been out for 5 years.
I've seen that
Sometimes.
with like DBT too, where somebody's like, we want 10 years of experience with DBT. I'm like, good luck. It didn't exist yet. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see that. I've also seen the other end. I once saw a job description that asked for 5 years of Microsoft Access experience, which, if you've ever worked in Microsoft Access, if you need to be that good at Microsoft Access, something has gone terribly wrong.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I want to talk on that a little tangent here, but I work with a lot of students who don't have 5+ years of experience in anything technical or in analytics. And sometimes they're afraid to apply to jobs with the years of experience. Now, I know having years of experience is important, but I like to try to give this analogy sometimes where let's say you have 5+ years of Access experience. Like once a year, you pulled Access. If you guys don't know what Microsoft Access is, it's basically, you can think of it as an old version of Microsoft version of SQL, basically, but
Yeah.
way worse. Like, let's say like you pulled that out of the attic and you used it once every year for 5 years versus, so you have 5 years of experience of Access versus me. Let's say I spent every waking second of 2023 studying Access. Like, so I only have half year of experience. How do you like, as a hiring manager, kind of rank those against each other?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, it's really hard to parse that out on somebody's resume. I mean, when you're writing your resume, I know you've already given this advice. You need to be hitting these keywords. So you're going to include in there that you've used Tableau. You might have honestly only used Tableau for one project. For me as a hiring manager, my goal isn't necessarily to rank them against each other, because my goal is not to hire the person with most years of experience necessarily. It's to hire the person who can best understand the role and understand what we need and understand the tools that we use to do so. Um, so either of those people could have a really good knowledge of Access. Most likely the person who's studied it more and more recently is going to have better knowledge of Access and its features. But to parse that out, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about, I really hope I'm not asking about Microsoft Access, but I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about the tool itself and the projects that you've done and how much you've used it to get a better sense of what that means. So yeah, that 5 years, honestly, it might not actually mean anything. It could still be helpful if you're writing your resume and you're thinking about all of your, say, Excel experience that you've used once a year for something. You should probably still include that. Like, don't sell yourself short on that knowledge. And then hopefully the hiring manager that you're working with is thinking about it a bit more holistically. You want to think about it from that function perspective and your ability rather than just the number on the resume.
Yeah, I love that. So, you guys listening, please don't sell yourself short. If you only have a little bit of experience, you never know. And also, one thing I like to tell people, this makes your job harder, Megan. So I apologize. But like she said, it's really hard to tell how good you are at a technical tool from your resume. And so we'll get to this later in the pipeline process, I'm sure. But
Mm-hmm.
you guys, don't be the first person to reject you because you're like, oh, I'm not good enough at SQL to apply to this job. Let them tell you that. Don't be the rejecter. You let Megan be the mean person. Don't be the mean person to yourself.
Yes. Yeah, but you make it a little harder on me. And again, it's an entry level role. You don't need to be an expert in SQL. Ideally, I have rejected resumes where somebody was looking for a more advanced role. And when we got into the hiring process, it looked like, oh, you're actually looking for a senior role. We're hiring a junior role right now. We can't align on those expectations. Like a junior role, I'm not looking for the ringer who comes in with 10 years of experience. That's almost never going to be the right fit for that person. But you don't have to come in with all of the prior knowledge. Like, come in, show me what you've learned, and we'll be able to figure out what's going to be the right fit.
Awesome. Okay, so you write this job description, you hand it over to HR. They post it somewhere on the internet
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, and applications start to come in. So can you walk us through how many applications, how long maybe you guys had the job
Yeah.
open, and how many applications you got?
Yeah, I think we had this role listed for like a week. We didn't give it long because we got 285 applications within a week. Honestly, when I looked at them and I looked at every single one of them, like looked at every resume, Probably about 70% of that applicant pool could have been successful in the role. Again, it's an entry-level role. A lot of this is about what you're able to learn and like what you've shown some promise in so far. So yeah, most of these people honestly could have done pretty well in the role. So that makes it really hard to narrow down. Honestly, when I hire a senior analyst, that's a lot easier because I can go through and see that like you don't have the body of experience to support that you've done this for a long time. You don't have the portfolio, you don't have the projects. When I'm looking at a junior analyst, I assume you're not going to have those things. So I have to parse out on a lot more stringent criteria. So if you don't have experience in the tech stack that I'm looking for, 285 applicants, if only half of those have experience with Tableau, which is what we use as our visualization tool, I'm going to talk to the half with Tableau before I talk to the other half with Power BI or Looker. You have to prioritize on these things just because there's a lot of people coming through. So out of that 285, I think we had 12 talk to our recruiter. That's our next stage is we do a recruiter screen. I'm a big believer in the hiring process. Like I'm not going to ask you to do a technical screen before we've put some time forward to you. We need to have that sort of give and take. So you talk to our recruiter at that stage. After that, we had 5 candidates exit because they either didn't respond or location or salary requirements didn't line up. So then we had 7 candidates take our code assessment. We do a SQL test on Code Signal to review candidates' skills. I really enjoy having something like technically grounded where I'm able to see the code you can write. It doesn't really work well to do like a quick Tableau assessment, but SQL's such a core skill and it's really easy to test with a lot of SQL questions. We're doing some grouping. I think there might be a window function question on there. So at that stage, actually, everybody passed our SQL interview, but we did have one candidate accept a different offer at that stage and exit. Yeah, our average completion time on that stage was 24 minutes. My goal is also to keep that stage pretty short. I don't want to ask you for like a 6-hour test.
Yeah.
If you're applying for lots of jobs, especially at the entry level, I'm not trying to keep you for many, many hours. The stage after that we moved to was my hiring manager interview. And in that stage, I'm asking usually some more problem-solving questions. So I'm going to ask you about something in your portfolio, something that you've gone deep on, and ask you things like, how would you expand that project? What else are you curious about this project that you might have worked on in your portfolio? If you were rebuilding it, like, what would you do differently this time? What other data would be helpful for driving decisions? Those sorts of questions to dive deep. Again, like, I'm not asking you about all of your experience in data analytics. I assume that you don't have that applying for an entry-level role.
I like how the questions you were asking, like, how would you expand this? Or what are some things you didn't get to? Because a lot of the times I have students who will work on a project for like 6 months and they feel so embarrassed to publish it because they're like, it's not done. It could be better. But I think we kind of know that no data project ever is perfect.
Oh, they're never done. Yeah.
And I love that you were like, hey, actually not finishing the project is a good interview problem to talk about. Cause you're like, what would you do if you had more time with this? And I think that's a really cool question.
Yeah. Like tell me more about what you want to dig into. Also, when you're coming at a data project, either you've got some curiosity, you've started moving into data analytics, or somebody who wants to ask some questions. Hopefully your portfolio projects that you're working on are things that you're interested in and you want to learn more about. So you're like going after data that may not have been analyzed elsewhere. So yeah, I want to hear about that curiosity. I want to hear what problems you're trying to solve. I've seen portfolio projects about like running and exercise habits. Somebody was prepping for a triathlon, I think. I'm like, I want to know what else you've learned about yourself through this process. What else would you try to optimize based on this? Because the other side of it is when you get into the world of data analytics and you're doing this for a business, again, you're not going to know everything, but the decision orientation is really important. Data analytics for academia is going to be a little different. That's a lot more like knowledge for the sake of knowledge. But in the business world, we're doing data analytics to help us be smarter about the way we run our business. So if you can translate that into the decisions you're making for yourself or what else this informs for you, that shows me a lot about your problem solving and ability to apply this to the business world.
Yeah. Personal projects are so much more fun because you're so much more passionate about it versus like a Titanic data set or like a Boston housing data set. It's like, guess what? I actually really don't care that much about the Titanic. Am I an awful person? I haven't even seen the movie. Like, I don't really care about that. But if you did a project about Pokemon or about running or about some movies or music you like, that's so much more powerful.
Music you listen to. Yeah. I've done personal breakdowns of like romance novels I read and the different tropes in them. It's so much more fun. Like it's a much more interesting way to hone your skills and you'll stay more engaged with it. It's generally more creative and going to be something different. To get started, it's absolutely helpful to like follow a tutorial from
For
a
sure.
$13 Udemy course, but I've probably already seen that portfolio project. So as a hiring manager, it's also nice to be able to see something novel, something that's uniquely you. And that doesn't have to be huge. It really honestly doesn't even need to be big data, but anything that you can do that's unique to you where you said, I have a question and here's how I'm going to go about solving it. It sort of brings that almost scientific method approach into the data analytics world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So at this point, you have I think you're meeting with 5 people. Is that right?
I talked to 6 in the hiring manager stage, and
Okay.
4 of them went through. The biggest gap for the 2 candidates who exited there, I think, was like visualization and data exploration skills. So then we moved into the team technical interview where I have 2 of the senior analysts on my team go through much more technical questions. So in that stage, you're going to see let's walk through your portfolio project and talk about how you built this in Tableau. You put something on Tableau Public. We're going to talk through the stages of building it. So they're going to be vetting your technical skills with a lot more detail. This shouldn't be a scary stage. Just feel confident speaking to the stages of not only how you did things, we're not going to ask which button did you push, but think about the methodology and why you chose to build something a certain way. So if you chose to do a calculation in SQL versus in a data visualization tool, why did you do that? And how did you go about figuring that out? Those are going to be the sorts of questions to talk to there.
Okay, awesome. So then your analysts, you're kind of doing this team interview. Now, let me ask you this. I mean, they've done this probably a few times, maybe in their
Mm-hmm.
careers, right? Do you give them questions? Do they come up with their own questions?
They come up with their own questions. I talk to them primarily about the goals. This is very similar to my management style in general, is I want to talk to them about the goals. What are we trying to find out? To bring it all back into the data world, interviewing is a form of getting data. This is a means of data collection. So I talk to them about what do we want to learn about the candidates at this stage? And I will help them with writing questions if they need it. But for the most part, I'm telling them I want to learn about their technical skills. I want to learn about how they go about solving problems. I want to learn about how comfortable they feel in this system. And you should be able to come back and tell me about those things.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great way to approach it. And something I'm not saying that your analysts or you do, but something I've seen in industry is, and not something I've done, I'll admit, when I've done interviews, is you think you're going to have more time to prepare than you actually do. And so you're 5 minutes before, you're like, oh crap, I have to ask some questions. And a lot of the times people will have done this enough that, and they have kind of the bigger goals, they can kind of ask the questions as they go. But I think as a candidate, it really helps you in that situation if you have a project where they can kind of base their questions off of, because that way you can speak confidently to something concrete versus they're asking abstract questions. So I think it's again when the projects can be really impactful in these interviews.
Yes. And that's something that if you can practice it when you're interviewing for this first role, it's still going to apply when you get downstream and you're interviewing for other roles in the data world. If you can talk about one major deliverable you did when you were a junior analyst, that's what's going to help you get that senior analyst job down the line, is being able to speak to that in detail, speak to the impact that had, speaking to the additional questions that you have. A lot of those interviews, when you get more advanced, are going to be similar. They just won't be based off of this general portfolio project. So it's a good thing to practice just for your overall career longevity. You just have to hopefully land in an interview with your hiring manager who's thought about it from this perspective. Because again, if I was gonna quiz you based off of your prior experience when you're hiring for an entry level role, that's not going to be a good experience for either of us. I'm not going to learn what I need to learn, and you're not going to really enjoy this interview or feel like you gained from that time.
Yeah, that's something I should have probably prefaced the whole podcast by, that Megan's awesome, you guys, and her team sounds great. And not every team or hiring manager is going to work this exact way, but we're lucky enough to get a little sneak peek behind the curtain for this particular instance. So sometimes you won't get so lucky and circumstances will be different. Yeah. This is a good opportunity. This is a good, in my opinion, this is the way to hire entry level.
Yeah. And you can still use a lot of this. Again, speaking to your portfolio projects, if somebody does want to come at you quizzing about your prior experience in an entry level position, not the choice I would make. But again, your portfolio can still speak to that. And especially if you can combine your portfolio with any other past experience, it does not have to be data analytics experience. You can make something really powerful and tell some really interesting stories about yourself in that interview, especially in the data space, because everything is data. You've done some sort of analysis. You've done some sort of decision making about something in your life. You should be making decisions for yourself. You should be able to explain, why did you want to get into data analytics? Was there any sort of analysis that went into deciding to go into this field? So if you were working in any other field, if that's the medical field, if that's retail or customer service. You've done something with data. You've had insights. You've collected data. Maybe it was anecdotal and you scratched something in a sheet of paper. You can draw all of this together and stack it up with what you've learned of data analytics to really sort of bolster your experience.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that a lot. Okay, so now you have these analysts interviewing these people. What happens next?
After that, that's actually our last stage. So we do that technical interview, and then I'm reviewing all of the feedback. So our system is we collect scorecards after every interview, and then I have access to review all of them. So I can see something that's been scored relatively objectively across every interview and every candidate and sort of evaluate how that adds up. So that'll be scoring on things like technical skills. How are your SQL skills? How are your Tableau skills? But it'll also include things like problem solving and other soft skills. How are you as a communicator? And I can evaluate against all of that. In this case, I had 2 candidates that I was sort of debating between in the final stage. And then I made the call on who to extend an offer to. Really, the differentiator for the candidate who got the offer is we're an education company. We're here to help people upskill, learn data analytics, was that she had prior experience in education. So all of her technical skills were great. Her communication skills were great. Her portfolio was great. But I had multiple candidates who had all of that. So her differentiator was really that education experience. That was really helpful for us. It was something that set her apart and made her like the perfect candidate for us.
And I want to emphasize that here. I work with a lot of teachers who want to get into data analytics, and a lot of them are fearful. Hey, I don't have a technical background. I come from an unusual background. But in this case, that non-technical background, the unusual background, was actually kind of the superpower that got her the job or him the job.
Yeah, like it's super, super helpful. Again, combine that portfolio, combine all the things that you've learned about data analytics with the other things that you know. Somebody out there is making ed tech software that needs to be sold to teachers. Like you understand teaching, you understand the education world. Like you can apply that knowledge to data analytics in that setting. Be the perfect candidate for that company rather than a pretty good candidate for a whole sea of companies. And the same could be applied again for like if you've got retail experience or customer service experience. You might look at a customer service analytics role, of which there are plenty. Take your prior experience in customer service and apply that to analytics. I did it myself. Like that's how I got into analytics was I studied healthcare in my undergraduate program and I took an analytics role at a healthcare company. So when you can sort of combine those things, it makes a much more powerful profile, makes you a much stronger candidate. Again, like you don't have to be okay for everybody. Okay for everybody will get you a lot of like looks, but you'll get the offer more when you can find a way to make yourself like just right for one company.
Yeah, I love that. And thanks for sharing yours. So I transitioned from chemical engineering. And when I was at ExxonMobil, they had these things it's called A Game. And it was basically like a company-wide analytics crowdsourcing competition. And I loved these things. It was so fun to participate in these. And at the time, I didn't have my master's degree. And I was competing. I compete in these like data analytics competitions against people with like PhDs in data science. A lot of the times I was able to perform at the level of these people who are much smarter than me, who knew how to do a lot more stuff than me, because they didn't know if sulfur and oil was bad or good. And like as a chemical engineer, that's like the most basic thing. Everyone else listening to this podcast is like, I don't know. But like that was something that was so fundamental to me. That, like I understood the domain so extremely well that I was actually able to produce better analyses because of that background. And so you guys need to stop thinking my background is holding me back. No, your background could be propelling you forward. You just don't realize it yet.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can find that sweet spot, you can really be a home run candidate for somebody working in that space. Like find the way to put it together. Yeah, it might hold you back if you're coming at it from like a really broad standpoint, but it's not so much that it's holding you back as other people might have the background that's propelling them forward. So finding your niche is really important. It helps a lot in what can be a really difficult and tiring hiring process.
There you go. Okay. So you hired this teacher and now they're junior data analyst for you guys. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. How's it going so far?
She's been amazing. She is very talented. I mean, I would like to take some credit for setting her up for success, but I mean, a lot of it's just her drive, her experience, all of the things that she learned before she started with us and all the knowledge that she brought. As far as setting her up for success, I'm very thoughtful with my onboarding plans. So they actually tie pretty well again with like that whole career ladder. It all goes together. So with that onboarding plan, we take it in sort of stages. Learn the business first, learn who we are as a company, start learning the people, and then you start learning the technology in that order. So we're going to start you out with all of the materials that we can share about like what we do, what our programs are, And then you'll start getting introductions to different teams. Who's the head of marketing that you need to know? Who's the head of sales that you need to know? All of those different functions. And then we'll start taking you into our Tableau ecosystem. So with that, we do some asynchronous time. We're going to point you at this folder, go through, ask questions. As a technical team, it's like one of the best times to figure out like things that are wrong and broken, because you've got somebody whose entire job in that period is just to go through and click on things and see what's broken, which is awesome. And then we do a lot of shadowing. So she spent a lot of time during her onboarding period shadowing the senior analysts on the team. So like, let's hop on Zoom together and just go through the day, see how things are working, to gain a lot of systems familiarity. And that's not going to get you everything. Our systems are big and complex. We've got a lot of data. It's a lot harder when you get into a larger, older company. Like, not everything's going to be documented. Not everything's going to be modeled according to the textbook. So you're going to find some ugly data models and some things that are confusing, and you just kind of have to work through those. But she's had a really great support structure through the whole team to be able to learn all of those weirdnesses. I don't think weirdnesses is a word, but I'm rolling with it. You learn all of those things that are weird, and it's not just about learning like our weirdness. There's going to be more of that at other companies. Everywhere I have worked has had weird stuff going on with their data models where you just threw something in there. It's like a supply closet that's like part of the way organized, and you just kind of have to figure out where the paper clips are. Things aren't necessarily where you think they're going to be or set up the way you think they should be. So it's not just about like learning how they're set up. It's learning how to figure out how they're set up, which is its own challenging skill. And that's not one that you're going to learn in your analytics boot camp. Something that comes from on-the-job experience, but it's also one of those things that you learn that really helps you level up and start moving towards that mid-level or senior analyst role.
Absolutely. I forgot to ask, are you guys a remote team, or are you guys hybrid? Are you guys in person?
We are remote, fully remote.
Okay. So one thing I caught there was you guys do have like shadowing. So you do that in Zoom, because I know a lot of people, a lot of them want the remote job, of course, but a lot of them are worried that they won't get the support that they'll need in a remote job, that they'll get stuck and they won't know what to do and they won't get the support that they needed. And I know everyone's not going to be as awesome as you or your team, but it does sound like you guys have a pretty robust plan of like, no, like we have some like trainings for you to take. We have some tasks for you to do. We'll hop together and just make sure that you are understanding where everything is. So these people aren't really left out to dry. They have help.
No, we very deliberately schedule a lot of shadowing time. I also mix in the ticket sizes and tasks. So it'll be something like in week 4, new hire will tackle their first ticket, where they will be doing that on a Zoom call with one of the senior analysts just to help them walk it through, but they're doing it this time instead of watching somebody do it. We set up a lot of that just in our onboarding infrastructure. But even longer term, my team does things like weekly knowledge shares. Even without having a junior analyst on the team, that's super helpful. We all know slightly different things. We all learn new things every day as we're working in data. So we connect on that knowledge share time. We also try to treat our team Slack channel sort of like an open workspace. So if you've ever sat in the office and you've got your 4 cubicles all next to each other, and maybe you're at your desk working and like 2 people working diagonally behind you, you sort of absorb it without having to like be in a meeting. You just kind of pick up what's happening. We try to treat our Slack channel like that. So it'll be, I'm not going to start a private message to ask a general question. Let me just throw it out on the team Slack.
Gotcha.
And then when you have time, you can pop through and read it and you can absorb it that way. So it just creates a lot of different ways for you to stay connected, keep asking questions. And then I also try to model all of this question asking as well so that everybody else feels comfortable with it.
That's basically the whole process, from going from almost 300 candidates to the one hired team member. So thanks so much for walking us through that. I have a few questions about it that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. So we talked about how the background of the teacher kind of set them apart to land this role. Was there anything else that set them apart that made you feel like, oh, this person's going to be a good hire?
So early on, when I'm looking at this stack of 285 resumes, 2 things will always stand out and get you through. One of them is a Tableau Public profile. Like, that's just, every time I see that, again, as a hiring manager working in the Tableau ecosystem, I love seeing that. Like, you can actually show me something you've done in Tableau. She had one of those. So that's one of those things that helps you move through. That's also helpful at the senior level. One of my senior analysts, like, I remember clicking through on her resume the first time because I saw that and showed some really cool visualizations. The other piece is just thoughtful formatting. So making sure to call out your experience first and foremost. And that includes, again, like your non-analytics experience. So I think she had framed up like, here's what I've learned in analytics so far. Here's my prior experience, and then focused her skills elsewhere. For your entry-level hires, like, I don't want to see a 3-page resume of everything you've ever done. I need it to be tidy. I need it to be quick, but making it clear right up front, like, this is what I've learned. Here's what I'm curious about. Here's what I know from me to move you forward. So those are really like the two standout things, like up front. Downstream, she asked a lot of good questions, even in the interview, and talked to me about how she was continuing to learn. So working on data problems on leak code and trying out different Tableau visualizations, like those sorts of things were just helpful to see. I love seeing that learning attitude just continuously, because again, you're not done learning when you start your first data role. Honestly, you're going to find a lot more that you're going to run up against, and it's going to hurt for just a minute where you're like, I thought I knew things and things are harder than they seem. So seeing that learning attitude before you come on shows me like you're ready to be successful. You're ready for the additional challenges that come when you start getting into like real messy data.
Yeah. Okay, great. So having some sort of a portfolio was big, and then having kind of that inquisitive background was good. The 1-page resume. So even if they have, like, let's say 20 years of prior work experience, you're still for the 1-page resume for this entry level role?
Yeah, when you're applying for an entry level role, even as a career changer, I still want to know that background. That's where something like an executive summary can be helpful. Directing me to your LinkedIn can be helpful to get the sense. I don't need an objective, but an executive summary that says I've been a teacher for 20 years and I'm looking to transition into data analytics. That's helpful to see. I'm not reading more than the first page most of the time, to be honest. There's a lot of these resumes to go through. So I'm looking again at what you've been doing recently, what learning you've done recently. That doesn't necessarily have to be work experience, but if you've spent the last 12 weeks in a boot camp, that's most of what I want to see up top. And then I want to get a taste of everything else. And then I want to look at your portfolio.
Okay. So yeah, you're looking at, it sounds like based off of that, your most recent experience, specifically like the one that's most relevant, even if it's a boot camp, the portfolio is kind of what you're looking at, because like you said, you had whatever, 288 resumes to look through. Let's just say, I brought my calculator out here. Let's say you did 288 resumes. Let's say you spent 5 minutes on each. That would be a total of 24 hours, which is like 3 work days, which I'm guessing is not, that's a little bit too long.
It's
right?
a little too long. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, it's a 2-second glance and then I move on. But yeah, I'm skimming, I'm looking quickly. So I need to be able to see quickly again, like, have you done any sort of major learning? I need that to be up top. Again, that whole like being really fit for purpose. So if you're a teacher applying at General Assembly or at an ed tech company, or if you're a nurse applying in healthcare, like, I want to be able to see that quickly. And those are really the top things. So when you're career changing, the overall volume of past experience in a different field isn't as helpful. I mostly want to see the things that really set you apart as a candidate. So again, like that learning, anything formal you've done, and the thing that makes you tailor-made for my team as a junior hire.
Okay. And with your applicant system, do you guys have like, I don't know, some sort of software that will also show you if keywords are mentioned on resumes? This is what I teach in my program. I can't remember the exact, I think it's called the 10-1-10 rule, where basically you have 10 seconds to make enough of an impression to earn 1 more minute. And then in that 1 minute, you could potentially earn 10 minutes. So some of these candidates you might have spent 12 minutes on, some of them you might have spent just a few seconds on, right?
I'd say, yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah. I think 10 seconds is around the decision window that says I'm either skimming this and moving on, or yeah, you caught my attention and I'm going to read this in more detail and catch more of it. I do like a keyword highlighter that just raises up, puts in bold, you've got Tableau experience or SQL experience. Like, that's helpful. But at the same time, like, my brain's pretty hardwired for that. So like, it's not the end of the world, but if you don't have it on your resume, like, I'm going to notice and I'm probably moving on pretty fast. Yeah, you've got to catch me quickly. There's a lot of these to go through. It's one of the hardest parts about moving into this field. I'm getting a lot of applicants very quickly. So anything that you can do to stand out quickly will help you move on to the next round.
Okay. That's good to know. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you was, how long was this whole process from you guys deciding you wanted to hire? We talked about you posting it. Maybe it was up for about a week or so. When does that person's accept their offer? And then when do they start?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. I think I extended an offer like beginning of September, and she started in late September. Ooh, let me see if I can find. I'm looking, like, flipping through my calendar right now.
That's awesome.
Like, when did I talk to our recruiter initially about that role? I was doing interviews in late August. But when did I talk to our recruiter? I think I probably had my first conversation with the recruiter on August 1st. can see that on my calendar now. I think we extended an offer like first or second week of September.
Okay.
And then she started in late September. So you're looking at like 6-7 weeks all in.
I think another thing to highlight that sounds like you guys did well was once you got enough applications where you're like, someone's getting here, like you said, maybe even 70%.
Yeah.
You guys took it down. But I don't think companies always take it down, unfortunately. And so what I try to stress with people I'm trying to help and teach is we want fresh jobs. Because like after it's almost like a 7-day expiration. That's not always true.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it is. And
yeah,
so
sometimes it's more likely for like a senior, more niche hire that's going to be up longer because we need to catch more resumes. Like if I'm hiring like a staff data engineer, we had that position posted for a while because it's hard to get the candidates that you need in for a role that's like a little bit more niche, requires a lot more experience. Yeah, pet peeve of mine personally, when those job postings stay up forever. My goal is not to talk to every person who ever might possibly have interest to then find the best person of all of the people. My goal is to get a good number of candidates who I think can do the role, and then of that group, evaluate who's going to be the best, which is a bit of a different perspective. So I don't want to leave that up forever. I do want to close it off. There's a lot of ways that this process sort of goes off the wheels that are not your fault as a candidate. There's a lot of things that I do specifically because I didn't care for them when I was applying for my first roles in data. So again, like taking the role down when it's gotten plenty of applicants. If you get rejected from a role, like there's so many reasons why that aren't necessarily your fault, that it could have just been, oh yeah, we forgot to take that down and we've already made a hire. Or like we've got 6 people in the final stage and we're not going to start the whole process over again. So it's a brutal process. It's very tough in a lot of ways, but it's important to keep in mind that a lot of these rejections really have very little to do with you.
Yeah, I love that. That you might be saying I was rejected 20 times. Well, guess what? Correlation is not causation. That could just say nothing about you. That could say, hey, your resume needs some work. Or that could say maybe you're not a good candidate, but you can't just jump to that ladder.
You can't just assume that it's because I'm awful. I'm like, there's so many other things. Like the hiring process is difficult on the company side as well. There's a lot of things that make it challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of these rejection reasons have very little to do with you. It might be that the position wound up getting canceled or closed, or they changed the job description. I've definitely had a lot of those where both on the hiring side and the getting hired side, where you get into the interview process and realize that something you thought was a nice to have was actually required. And then that job description changes. So you thought you were a great fit, but it turns out that like you were missing a secret quality that actually you didn't even know was there. So there's a lot of things that, again, really have very little to do with you and your performance that can lead to your rejection. So it's a tough game. It's hard to evaluate, like, what do you need to change if your resume is not clicking? But again, like when it comes to making it through this challenge, just remember, like, it's not all you. There's so many different reasons.
Yeah, I love that. Don't be so hard on yourself, guys. That's the message. There's a lot of jobs out there. I know the rejection is tough, but try to find the jobs where you're more of a niche candidate. You have that good background. The portfolio helps. And I think not giving up hope is a big deal right there. Okay, sweet. Megan, thank you so much. Anything else you'd give advice to aspiring analysts and what they can do on their job hunt?
Yeah, again, patience. Think about specifically like what you want. So don't just filter the job search. Like if you're on LinkedIn browsing job listings and you're an ex-teacher, don't be like, oh man, none of these are in ed tech. You can also take it from the other angle of, I want to go work for an ed tech company, or I want to go work for another education company, and go find lists of those. Go look at startups that are recently funded. There's a lot of other angles that you can look at it where the job might not be posted, or it might be posted under a different title, or it might just not hit your feed. So get creative. Obviously that can create an incredibly broad world. So like get creative within the bounds of like what excites you most and what you feel like is the best fit for you. And that helps you expand in a way that's going to be productive.
Sweet. I love it. Megan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us and help explain this whole job application funnel. And I know I learned a lot today, and I'm sure everyone else learned a lot. If people want to go and learn more and follow you, where should they go?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. We'll add that to the show notes down below in the podcast. Megan, thanks so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I don't know about you guys, but that was one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. I feel like there was so much gold, so much information packed in there that you might have to listen to this one again. Thank you, Megan, so much for coming on and sharing all those valuable resources. If you guys want more valuable resources on your data career journey, please check the show notes down below. I spend a lot of time trying to help you in the best way possible, and I have a lot of good resources down below. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys on next week's episode.